Heard from the minister, the burdens of mitigation and adaptation do not fall fairly. To date, Africa is perhaps the continent most affected by the climate crisis and yet least responsible for its causes. Our next keynote speaker says we must not allow that paradox to stand in the way of action. Africa should leapfrog dirty energy and embrace clean power. And as we heard from Minister Baerbock, under his leadership, Kenya is doing just that, aiming to reach 100% clean energy by 2030. Please join me in welcoming the President of Kenya, Dr. William Ruto.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to join you this morning in this energy transition dialogue. I am grateful and I congratulate those who have been involved in bringing us together as the conference celebrates its 9th anniversary. Let me also register my appreciation to the government and the people of Germany for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to me and my delegation. The Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue provides a valuable platform to exchange ideas on how to address the two interlinked challenges we face, that is of climate and energy. The conference comes just a week after the IPCC released the synthesis report, which essentially puts the world on notice that we are on the brink of irrevocable damage unless we act swiftly and before it's too late. And the message was loud and clear. The world needs to reach net zero sooner than was anticipated in the Paris Agreement, that is by 2040 instead of 2050. How to achieve that goal and what are the drastic actions needed to cut emissions is the dialogue that governments and policymakers around the world must have. And that is why this energy transition meeting is timely. The dialogue on energy transition, on how to balance energy security, affordability, and lower greenhouse emissions, is at the heart of sustainable development, and it is a transition that needs to happen even faster. The vital role of energy in our lives and economies must, and was brought home last year in 2022, especially to Europe, more compellingly than ever before in recent history. Europe is accelerating its transition to renewable energy, now driven not only by an existential climate imperative, but also by energy security concerns. I think my sister has ably put that in context. Let me today share with you what this transition looks like in Kenya and for Africa, and give the vision of our Africa's assets and our ability to leapfrog technologically, make the continent, and Kenya in particular, a critical partner if we are all together going to navigate this next era of energy transition. As I do that, I hope you won't mind me reminding us that 138 years ago, a very different conference was taking place here in Berlin. One that also involved collaboration and cooperation, but of a more exclusive and violent nature. At that Berlin conference, it was a German chancellor who convened 14 of the world's leading powers to divide Africa among themselves and carve up our land and our people as they saw fit. In the years since that conference, so much has changed. We have seen the rise and fall of empires, the independence of African states, and the dawn of new challenges that demand a collective and collaborative response from all of us as we are gathered here in one such. Today, in Africa, we face multiple intertwined crises. We are the continent least responsible, but most vulnerable to climate change and its impacts. We are the continent with the least energy access, with over 600 million Africans still without access to energy. And of course, Africa still carries the scars of colonialism and economic and institutional dependencies that followed it. We not only have to provide secure energy access in clean and renewable way, we need to do this while managing economic dependencies, addressing odious debts, completely shifting our development models to finally prioritize the true flourishing and well-being of our people. But I have not come here to dwell on the past or to list seemingly unsurmountable challenges. Africa is not simply a victim in this story. Quite the contrary. It is precisely in light of these challenges that Africa's leadership on climate action is not just powerful, but it is also inspiring. In Africa, not too far from here, lies a continent of abundance, especially when it comes to renewable energy and green industrialization potential. The continent's renewable energy potential is 50 times greater than the anticipated global electricity demand for the year 2040. The untapped solar and wind potential is rated as super abundant in most African countries, meaning the potential is over 1,000 times the current demand. By contrast, all of Europe is classified as either replete or stretched, with renewable energy potential less than 10 times the current demand, indicating they will not be able to meet a massive growth in energy demand with domestically generated supply. Moreover, in Africa lies 30 to 40% of the world's minerals, including those on which the green energy transition depends, and plentiful relevant natural resources and assets. Add all that to Africa being home to the world's youngest and most rapidly expanding workforce. 60% of Africans, for the record, are under the age of 25. And you start seeing, from where I stand, why we need a conversation about Africa. Besides, we have the benefit of being able to leapfrog into a cost curve of technologies that didn't exist even a decade ago, one that supports green economic growth. As Frans Timmermans said a few weeks ago, and I quote, "The continent of Africa is probably going to be the most important partner for Europe in terms of developing the renewable energy sector," end of quote. And Kenya is leading the way. We will be the continent's green energy hub. Our national grid is small, at just 3 gigawatts, yet 92% of the power on it comes from zero-carbon sources like geothermal, hydro, wind, and solar. We aspire to reach 100% renewable in 2030 and to take a quantum leap to 100 gigawatts grid size and 100% renewable by 2040. That is possible thanks to our untapped potential of nearly 78 gigawatts of solar energy, over 57 gigawatts of wind energy, at least 10 gigawatts of geothermal energy, and 6 gigawatts of hydro. But the small grid size and relatively high energy costs have made it hard to attract energy-intensive industry to Kenya in the past. Yet energy-intensive anchor demand is exactly what is needed to make investment in additional renewable energy generation capacity bankable. Therefore, renewable energy generation capacity and industrial deployment need to be developed concurrently to overcome the current stalemate where each is waiting for the other to happen. This is a fundamental difference with European renewable energy development, where limitations may be available locations, maybe permits, and grid management, but you do not need to line up demand before you develop an investment case. This African reality tends to surprise foreign investors and drive the misunderstanding that there is no viable opportunity. So, what does Europe need to do to enable Africa meet its full potential as an energy and climate solution center? 1, Africa needs the right type and amount of investment capital to become the green industrial powerhouse of the world. Renewable energy investment and associated infrastructure is almost all upfront capex. With the right level of investment, Africa can provide energy success for all by 2030 while reducing total emissions related to energy generation by approximately 80%. Let me say that again. With the right level of investment, Africa can provide energy access for all by 2030 while reducing total emissions related to energy generation by approximately 80%. Number 2, Africa should position to serve European demand for products and services and not to be locked out through trade barriers. The carbon border adjustment mechanism to be introduced by the EU should engage production from places such as Africa that could offer low embedded emissions produced using renewables. And number 3, to enhance innovative financing, the EU should access more high-quality African carbon credits, which offer core benefits such as biodiversity and improved livelihoods to be used in EU emission trading compliance markets. We need to work together to raise standards and avoid low-integrity carbon while realizing high prices for African countries and communities that are doing the difficult work of protecting nature and managing carbon. In Kenya, Parliament is finalizing the enactment of the carbon market regulations and activation plan, which should be in force in a few months. Aligning European concessional and multilateral capital to Africa's climate action agenda will not only generate economic growth and competitiveness, but also contribute to addressing the climate crisis for humanity. There is need to face down climate-incompatible funding so as to free funds for climate action and lock much more concessional finance and low-risk development finance needed to be much more available, much more accessible, and much more affordable. Number 5, African economies do not have sufficient access to suitable debt for development to make the necessary investments for climate action. The debt to GDP ratio in Africa today stands at 65, up from 57%, the pre-pandemic figure in 2019. The risk profile of countries change between global rating agencies looks at the debt to GDP ratio and interpret the country's debt carrying capacity. Number 6, access to international finance markets at very different rates, the brunt of monetary policy from advanced economies that pumped liquidity into their economies during the pandemic to protect their populations, currency depreciation, and expenses debt servicing, all coupled with climate change impacts, continue to impede growth and investment in clean technologies. Africa can benefit from European, and in particular German experience in workforce development and reskilling. Kenya will require a significant investment in building capacity and skills in its young workforce, and Germany's success in developing a fit-for-purpose vocational training system provides a good model that Kenya can and is adopting, and while learning through other partnerships. In fact, the government of Kenya has succeeded over the past 8 years to increase the number of students in our TVETs from about 90,000 to the current 500,000 students. In Kenya, we are on track in driving a carbon-negative industrialization agenda. Investments into our country will be industry built on 100% renewable energy. Germany, a prolific exporter of industrial manufacturing capacity, including into Kenya, should establish Kenya as a key industrial hub for German manufacturers as they transition to a new era. A combination of German technology and Kenyan geothermal and renewable resources is the best collaboration for green industrialization. New sales of electric cars, vans, and especially two-wheelers has been steadily on the increase, and so Germany could make an ideal partner in this very important and transformative journey towards global e-vehicle manufacturing hub. We will also be a critical partner to Europe in the supply of green hydrogen. Hydrogen produced using renewable energy can be exported to any part of the world, including Europe. Germany's green hydrogen strategies anticipate that the country will have to import 85% of its green hydrogen requirements by 2030. As Europe's green hydrogen demands support the development of reliable supply chains and rules-based international hydrogen markets, Kenya is a good investment partner to help decarbonize the German economy and green the EU manufacturing capacities. You can see from my discussion that we are moving fast in Kenya. We have the road ahead mapped out for green growth, and we are well on track to be the green energy hub. We offer, especially to Europe, the potential for a strategic green energy partnership. That partnership requires private and public investment to build together on the assets we have. We can accelerate the energy transition radically, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while at the same time protecting our economic growth. But it requires bold strategic partnerships. Winning will not be possible without allies and partners who will bring technologies and investments necessary to unlock the huge renewable energy resources in Kenya and the continent of Africa for a mutually beneficial win-win outcome. Of course, we must acknowledge that the EU has been an ally and partner to Africa on these issues for many years now. In 2007, we saw the launch of the Africa-EU Energy Partnership with the aim to facilitate the achievement of universal access to affordable, sustainable, and modern energy services in Africa. We have also seen partnerships deepened beyond the continent level to bilateral levels. Most recently, these have come in the form of just energy transition partnerships, which I know we will be hearing much more about over the next coming days. And of course, Europe remains one of the biggest investors and trading partners in Africa's economies more broadly. It goes without saying that Africa-Europe relations have helped create millions of jobs and remain a critical cornerstone of our future. In conclusion, the challenge I put forward to us for the next days is as follows. If we want to have a real chance of addressing the climate crisis, if we want to have a real chance of addressing past and persistent inequalities, and if we want to have a real chance of breaking the cycle of dependence that have plagued Africa and the global South more broadly for decades, then we will need to rise to the challenge of genuine partnership. Partnerships for renewable energy developments across the continent that are people-centered, socially and environmentally sound. Partnerships that do not simply worsen the existing cycles of indebtedness and dependence. Partnership that puts real, additional financing into African-led just transitions without simply increasing debt and profit extraction. Partnerships that do not push Africa further into the past and further into fossil fuel lock-in, while failing to invest in real transition pathways towards a better, brighter, and cleaner future. I hope you all will join me in the next few days in rising to this challenge of genuine partnership. Finally, I would like to announce to you that Kenya is hosting the first ever Africa Climate Action Summit in Nairobi from 4th to 6th September this year. The object of the summit is to rally the world to tackle climate challenges that the least emitting continent, and to more importantly tap the numerous opportunities that Africa presents towards global zero ambition. The summit will provide a unique platform to deliberate on the nexus between climate change and Africa's development reality, and the need to push for increased investment in climate action globally, and specifically in Africa. I invite German and European companies and organizations to come and sample opportunities and ideas on Africa's contribution to solving this global climate challenge that poses existential threat to humanity. Let us work together for pro-climate, pro-growth development. It has been proven that we can reduce emissions even as GDP grows. And Kenya and Africa are the best partners for this paradigm shift. I thank you.
Thank you very much, President Ruto. You have given us powerful inputs for our dialogue over the next 2 days, including for a session specifically on cooperation between Africa and Europe that we will host this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to climate justice, few international leaders are more committed than our next keynote speaker. She's a tireless advocate for broadening access to sustainable clean energy and accelerating the industrial transformation. And she was recently awarded the coveted Energy Institute Prize for her efforts to mentor and empower young people to get involved. She's an esteemed return guest here at BETD. It is a great honor to welcome back to this stage the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN